The bell above the door chimed as Clara Hayes stepped into the thrift shop on Oak Street, brushing raindrops from her coat sleeve. The place smelled faintly of dust and linseed oil, a scent that always reminded her of forgotten things waiting to be remembered. Shelves leaned with old clocks, chipped teacups, and picture frames holding faces of strangers. Somewhere in the back, a fan hummed tiredly, stirring air that hadn't been changed in years. Clara had come looking for something ordinary, a used typewriter, reliable enough to survive another few years of daily newspaper work. But as she walked through the aisles, her eyes caught on one object behind the counter. A heavy black Royal Quiet Deluxe, its silver keys glinting faintly under a single flickering bulb. It was beautiful in a way old machines often are, not polished or perfect, but solid, purposeful. Its keys were slightly uneven, the kind of wear that suggested years of letters, stories, and confessions tapped out in dimly lit rooms. "That one?" the shopkeeper asked, noticing her pause. "Been sittin' here near a month. Estate sale over in Maple Hollow. Belonged to a teacher, I think. Fella said she used it right up until the day she passed." Clara ran her fingers along the cool metal, tracing the faint scratches near the platen. "Does it still work?" The man shrugged. "Seems so. Tried it myself. Ink's dry, but the mechanics are fine. Can't get the ribbon replaced these days, though. Supply's been slow since the war." She smiled politely, already knowing she'd take it. There was something about the typewriter, an odd pull, as if it had been waiting for her. "I'll take it," she said simply. By evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and shining. Clara carried the typewriter home, careful with every step on the narrow stairs to her small apartment above the bakery. The air inside smelled of sugar and yeast. She'd grown used to it, the constant hum of ovens and laughter below. She set the typewriter on her wooden desk by the window, the one that overlooked Main Street and the flickering neon sign of Cooper's Diner. Outside, couples walked arm in arm beneath streetlights, umbrellas reflecting yellow light on wet sidewalks. She made tea, sat down, and rolled in a fresh sheet of paper. When she pressed the first key, the familiar click-clack echoed softly through the room. Her fingers moved automatically, old habit from years of typing columns, obituaries, and weather notes for the Elmford Gazette. Yet there was something satisfying about this machine, the firmness of the keys, the weight of each letter. She typed a few sentences just to test it, words that didn't mean anything. Then she stopped, leaning back to listen to the quiet. The ticking of her wall clock filled the silence. Somewhere below, the bakery's radio played a slow jazz tune. And then, faintly, she heard it. A soft metallic sound, almost like a key being pressed. Clara frowned. She leaned closer. The typewriter sat still, the paper resting under the roller, white and untouched, except for one small thing. At the bottom corner, near where her last sentence ended, a faint indentation had appeared. Not inked, not struck hard, but pressed lightly enough to leave a mark. One single word. "Wait." She blinked, confused. Maybe she had brushed it accidentally. She reached to smooth the paper flat, but the word remained, not typed by her, yet unmistakably there. She stared for a long while until the tea grew cold. Finally, she tore the page free, set it aside, and decided fatigue was to blame. She'd worked too long at the paper that day, editing obituaries and community bulletins until her eyes blurred. Before bed, she placed the sheet in the drawer with a faint laugh. "Wait," she murmured aloud. For what, exactly? That night, the rain returned. She dreamed of paper rustling and keys moving on their own. Slow, deliberate, like someone trying to speak through a wall of years. When she woke in the pale light of morning, she found another page still in the typewriter. 3 words had been typed neatly across the center. Do not forget. Clara didn't tell anyone about the message the next morning. It felt too strange to explain, too delicate, like a secret that would crumble if spoken aloud. She convinced herself it had been a trick of the keys. Some mechanical slip caused by the ribbon tension or the weight of humidity in the air. Machines had moods. She often joked to her editor. Perhaps this one had simply chosen to show hers. Still, when she returned from work that evening, she found herself walking straight to the desk before even removing her coat. The typewriter sat quietly, the sunlight from the window catching its silver trim. The paper she'd left there that morning was blank. She hesitated, then rolled in a new sheet and sat down. All right, she murmured. Let's see what you've got to say tonight. The first few minutes passed as expected, the ordinary rhythm of her fingers tapping, the bell chiming softly at the end of each line. But somewhere between her sentences, she paused. A sudden chill of awareness moved through her. The unmistakable feeling that she wasn't alone. Not in a frightening way, but in the way one sometimes senses a presence just beyond sight. Clara leaned back, listening. Nothing but the tick of the clock and the faint hum of the bakery downstairs. Then softly, like a breath click, her eyes went to the carriage. Another key had depressed slightly, as though pressed by invisible fingers. One letter, then another. She sat frozen, heart thudding in her chest as the typewriter spelled, slow and uneven. Please. The word sat in the center of the page, fragile as if it might fade. Clara swallowed hard. Please what? She whispered, half expecting an answer. None came. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the rain pattering against her window, and the occasional groan of pipes in the walls. Every now and then she thought she heard faint tapping, like a single key being tested somewhere in the dark. By morning, she was convinced it had all been in her imagination. Sleep-deprived minds could conjure anything. But when she walked into the room, her breath caught. A new page was rolled neatly into the platen, and a short paragraph had been typed, uneven, as if by trembling hands. The words you write are mine too. I am sorry for what I left unsaid. She sat down slowly, reading the lines again and again. Her rational mind reached for explanations. A prank, perhaps. Maybe the shopkeeper had known something about the typewriter, or it had some sort of hidden mechanism. But then she remembered how tightly she'd locked the door before bed. Clara decided to test it. She tore out the page and replaced it with a fresh one. Then she typed in her neat, deliberate hand, "Who are you?" She left the sheet in place and went to work, forcing herself to think of other things. The newspaper's stubborn printing press, Mrs. Calloway's missing cat column, the editor's endless insistence that stories should start with punch. But her mind kept circling back to the typewriter, sitting alone in her apartment, waiting. By the time she returned home, the sun had already set. The bakery was closing. The smell of sugar lingered faintly in the stairwell. She unlocked her door, heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. The paper had changed. The page she'd left was no longer blank. Typed neatly beneath her question were 4 words. You already know me. Clara's hands trembled as she traced the letters. The words were faintly smudged, like ink that had waited years to dry. For the next few days, she told herself not to feed it, not to reply, not to play along. But she couldn't help it. Something about the messages pulled at her, the same way an old melody might stir a forgotten memory. So she began a strange correspondence, typing simple questions before bed and reading the answers each morning. Where are you? Close. What do you want? To be remembered. It went on like that for nearly a week. She kept the pages in a box beneath her desk, afraid someone might see them and think her mad. One night, as she sat staring at the machine, she noticed a faint engraving near the bottom of the frame. a small oval plate with letters worn nearly smooth. She rubbed at it with her thumb until the name reappeared. E. M. Wilcox, Springfield, 1939. Something about the date tugged at her. She'd seen it somewhere before. Maybe in one of the archives at the newspaper. She made a mental note to check in the morning. But before she could rise from the desk, the carriage twitched suddenly and the bell gave a small, crisp chime. A single new line appeared, typed in quick succession as though by unseen urgency. "Don't look for me." Clara froze, her pulse catching. The typewriter sat motionless again, its keys glinting dully in the lamplight. For the first time since buying it, she covered the machine with a cloth before bed, not out of fear, but out of something else. Something that felt almost like respect. But long after the light went out, she lay awake wondering what she had just been told, and who exactly was doing the telling. Clara arrived early to the Elmford Gazette office that morning, long before the presses started humming. She told herself it was for work, but her hands trembled slightly as she sorted through the archive drawer marked Obituaries, 1939. The air smelled of ink and old paper, dry and brittle, like breath held too long. Her eyes scanned column after column until they landed on a name that froze her in place. Edward M. Wilcox, age 28, teacher at Elmford High. Died in a car accident on Route 14. March 3, 1939. Survived by fiancée, Miss Evelyn Carter. Clara read it 3 times, each word sinking deeper than the last. A teacher. A fiancé. Springfield. The same town engraved on the nameplate. She leaned back in her chair, the air suddenly colder. At lunch, she asked quietly around the office. No one remembered the name. The war had come and gone since then. Faces had changed. Buildings rebuilt. The past had been folded away like yellowed letters in a box. That evening, when she returned to her apartment, the air felt heavier. The typewriter sat in its usual place, the cloth draped neatly over it, a habit she'd adopted since the night it warned her not to look. But she couldn't resist. She lifted the cloth, set it aside, and rolled in a blank page. "I know who you are," she typed slowly. She waited. For a long while, nothing happened. Then the carriage gave a small, reluctant twitch. Letters appeared one by one, faint and unsteady. "Then you know why I can't rest." Clara's throat tightened. "No," she whispered aloud. "I don't." She typed the words quickly, hands trembling. "What happened to you?" The answer came slower this time, as though the machine struggled to find the strength to remember. The letter never reached her. The last one. "I waited too long to send it." Clara sat back, her eyes on the paper. She could almost hear the sound of a man's voice behind those words, tired, regretful, trying to make peace with something left undone. The bakery downstairs was already closed. The street outside had gone still. She poured herself tea but forgot to drink it. When she looked again at the typewriter, more words had appeared. "You found me. Please, finish what I began." "Finish?" she whispered. The paper stopped moving. The machine fell silent. But something inside her shifted, a kind of quiet understanding. She pulled the drawer from her desk and took out the box of pages she'd been keeping. Dozens of lines, half-sentences, small fragments of a voice trying to reach across time. All of them, she realized, read like parts of a letter. Over the next few nights, she began to piece them together, one sheet at a time. The messages weren't random. They formed the outline of a story. A man engaged to a woman named Evelyn, planning to leave town to take a teaching post in another state. He wrote to her before the move but never sent the letter. The accident on Route 14 happened the very night he sealed it. By the 5th night, Clara could recite his words by heart. There was one line that stayed with her. I am leaving only because I believe our love deserves more than this small town will give us. It struck her in a way she couldn't explain. Maybe because she, too, had stayed too long, typing other people's stories, watching the years drift by like the pages of someone else's book. That evening, she sat at the typewriter and began typing in return. Not questions this time, but words of her own. I will finish it for you, Edward. Tell me what you want to say. She waited. The room grew still. Then, with a sound that was almost like a sigh, the typewriter came alive. Click. Click. Each key pressed down with purpose, steady and sure. The words flowed faster now, not halting or hesitant. Tell her I kept the ring. Tell her I never stopped believing she would wait. Tears blurred the page. Clara didn't stop it. She let the machine speak until the words slowed, then stopped altogether. She removed the page carefully and laid it on the desk beside the others. The letter was complete now. Raw, unfinished, and yet somehow whole. Outside, the streetlights flickered as a light wind moved through town. Clara looked out the window, down at the quiet bakery sign, and thought of all the letters in the world that never reached the people who were meant to read them. She turned back to the typewriter. Edward, she said softly, I'll find her. I'll make sure she knows. The bell at the end of the carriage gave one final chime, gentle as a heartbeat. And on the page, in faint type, appeared 2 last words. Thank you. The morning light fell across Clara's desk, pale and soft, revealing the faint outlines of coffee rings and scattered sheets of paper. The letter lay before her, assembled from weeks of ghostly correspondence. Every page bore Edward M. Wilcox's uneven type, the kind of imprint that came from old keys and a hand that had once trembled. She ran her fingers across the top line, tracing each word as if it were a pulse beneath her fingertips. It wasn't madness anymore. She didn't feel afraid. The words had found her for a reason, and she knew what she had to do. By afternoon, she had tracked Evelyn Carter's last known address through the town records, an old farmhouse on the edge of Maple Hollow. Clara hesitated at first, unsure what she might find. But the thought of Edward's voice echoing in that typewriter pushed her forward. The road to Maple Hollow wound through quiet fields lined with weathered fences and drowsy horses. The radio in her car crackled faintly with big band music, the kind that always made her think of her father. She parked near a mailbox marked E. Turner. The name was different, but something told her it was still the same woman. Clara approached the porch, clutching the envelope she'd typed herself. Edward's letter, neatly transcribed from the machine's pages, sealed in cream paper and tied with a blue ribbon. The steps creaked beneath her shoes. When the door opened, she found herself staring at an elderly woman with silver hair pulled back neatly, and soft eyes that still held light. Yes? The woman asked gently. Mrs. Turner. Clara's voice wavered. My name is Clara Hayes, I think I have something that belongs to you. Evelyn looked puzzled but invited her in, leading her to a parlour filled with fading photographs and sunlight. On the mantel sat a small framed picture of a young man in a teacher's coat. Clara knew his face instantly. I found your fiance's typewriter, Clara said softly. It spoke to me. Evelyn's smile faltered. Her hand went to her heart. Edward's? She whispered. That old Royal. They said it was lost after the accident. Clara nodded and offered the letter. He never sent this, but I think it was meant for you. Evelyn hesitated before taking the envelope. She unfolded the pages with trembling fingers, eyes moving slowly over each line. As she read, her lips parted, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint tick of a mantel clock. When she reached the end, tears glistened on her cheeks. She pressed the paper to her chest and whispered, He always said he would write. I thought time had taken that promise. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. I think he just needed someone to help him finish it. Evelyn looked up then, really looked at her, and something changed in her expression. You remind me of him, she said quietly. He used to say there was no such thing as coincidence, only unfinished stories waiting for the right person. The two women sat together in the stillness, the letter between them. Outside, the trees moved gently in the breeze, their shadows flickering across the lace curtains. When Clara finally left, Evelyn followed her to the porch. Would you like to keep the typewriter? She asked. Clara shook her head. It's yours. It's home now. Evelyn smiled faintly. Perhaps, but maybe it's told all it needed to. As Clara drove back through the quiet roads, the world seemed softer. The fields shimmered gold in the afternoon light, and the hum of the engine blended with the faint rhythm of keys in her memory. Click, click, click. That night, when she returned to her apartment, the desk looked strangely empty without the machine. Still, she felt no sense of loss, only peace. She poured tea, opened her window to the cool night air, and sat listening to the sounds of the street below. Laughter, a car horn, the faint music from the diner sign across the way. But just before she turned out the light, something caught her eye. The drawer of her desk was slightly open. Inside, where she had kept the old pages, lay one final sheet she didn't remember placing there. It was blank, except for a single line typed neatly in the center. You finished it. Clara smiled. For the first time in years, she felt no need to ask questions. She tore the page gently from the roller, folded it, and placed it inside a small box with her favorite keepsakes. Her mother's locket, a dried pressed rose, a ticket stub from her first train ride. Years later, when Clara's niece would inherit the apartment, she would find that same box tucked away in the back of the drawer. Inside was the folded note, still crisp, still carrying that faint smell of ink and dust. She would turn it over in her hands, puzzled, and wonder what story it once belonged to. And maybe, somewhere, through memory, through time, a single key would press itself again, typing softly into the silence. Remember, if this story touched something deep inside you, a memory, a voice, or a moment you thought was lost, leave a like, share it with someone who still believes in quiet miracles, and don't forget to subscribe. Because some stories are meant to be remembered, and the next one might just find you.